Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Milondo, and I'm going to present to you the subject Ethics for HIV/AIDS Management. The code is ETHOD3, FOD3. The purpose of this presentation is to prepare you for the upcoming exam, and then also to help you and assist you on what you have to do as part of your preparation. This presentation is divided into two sections. The first section is looking at what do you do before the exam, how do you prepare yourself, and I'm going to share some tips with you, some experience guidelines, some information or things that I've learned from my experience preparing exam papers, working with students. And then we're going to also look at during the exam, what do you need to do as part of your examination. And then the second part of this presentation is I'm going to look at the content of the subject itself. Going to look at the different thematic areas which are very important. And please note that you as a student are not limited only to this thematic areas, but it is still expected from you to read the whole subject and to have an understanding of the whole content of the subject. You have to know all the units, all the chapters of the subject, and preferably I will suggest is that you will have an understanding of the whole subject and not just what I am going to prepare or present in this presentation. So first and most important thing is that you have to know that if you are going to write this exam, you have to prepare yourself. And preferably when you know you are preparing yourself for the exam, give yourself at least 2 months before the exam. Some people prefer a month, 2 months probably it's fine. Come up with a timetable, an exam timetable, where you draw up a timetable which are very, very, very important. And so as part of this timetable, you are going to prepare yourself, and then for an example, if your chapter is having, or your book or your subject is having 10 chapters, so divide these 10 chapters into a period of 1 month or 2 months. If you want to have 1 chapter a week or 2 chapters a week, it all depends on you, but it's very important that you need to have a timetable to prepare yourself and to make sure that you are ready for the exam. So after you have a timetable, then the first thing that what you have to do based on your timetable is to read through the manual. Chapter by chapter, very important. The reason of your reading is you want to understand the content of your chapter, and then also the context of the chapter itself. So many students make the mistake that they want to memorize the chapter or the book or the subject, but they don't understand. So, and while you are reading, as part of your understanding the content is to make notes. That's number 2. Make notes, underline the words or the concept that you don't understand. Make additional notes, whether it's on your study guide manual or whether it's in the book. Make additional notes, which is very important. Write those concepts, those keywords down per chapter, because it's very important that when you are going to go to the third stage where you're going to revise go through what you have studied, then your notes will play a very important role. It's very important that you may have to make notes and you go through your notes, because it will help you a lot. And also it also shows, and it was proven, and it's also proven that making notes also help you that you will remember what you write down than more than what you are actually memorizing. Because remember, you are writing this exam, and making these notes, as you write these notes, you are actually making your mind to restore or to store the information down. So when you're going to write, you're actually going to write what you have, what your notes is all about. Then important, the fourth one is you need to revise, and the revision, as I say, is you go through your notes, you look at the keywords, you look at the concept, extra notes which are very important that you have to do. Then during the exam, where most students are making this mistake, When they get the exam paper in front of them, they just start to write. The first thing, give yourself 5 to 10 minutes to read through the question paper. Read through the exam paper. Read through all the 6 questions that are on your exam paper. And the reason why you want to make sure from those 6 questions, you only need to answer 5. Which of the 5 are the easiest to answer? Once you have identified your first mark, you mark those questions and you start with a question that's very easy, because it will help you when it comes to the time management of your exam. Remember, you only have 2 hours, 3 hours. When you start with your most difficult question, you might waste very precious time, and by the time you reach coming to your easiest question, then your time is very limited. So it's very important that you have to select those questions that are easier. Then when you start to write the exam, or start to answer the question on the script, is first read the question that you've chosen to understand what the question is all about, because it's very important that people do not understand what they are writing. So understand what the question is saying and then start to write. Then lastly and most important is answer the question. Don't interpret the question. You are not there to analyze the question. You have to answer the question that's asked. Don't assume, don't use assumption. Make sure that you read and you answer the question. So these are the guidelines, the tips in a nutshell that can help you, and that have helped so many of my students to prepare themselves for exams. And don't make the biggest mistake where the day that you're going to write the exam, that early in the morning, wake up, started to write, study, and to revise. This is where most students are making the mistake. Not all people are gifted with photogenic mindset or photographic minds that can just memorize within an hour and then you can write. So we are not all like that gifted. So it's very important that you give yourself ample time to prepare, to study, and to be ready for the exam. So these are the tips. So you might follow it. It's tailor-made. You might use it. You might not use it. You might change it according to your plan. What it's much easier for you. So we're going to go into the second content of the subject. I'm going to look at the content. Now, as I say, you are not limited only to what I am going to present as part of the examination scope. You are still expected to read the whole manual, the whole study guide, to have an understanding on the content and the context of the whole subject. So it's very important. Please make sure, don't make that mistake and only select in certain chapters and think those chapters are going to be the exam. Make sure that you understand the whole subject and not just certain chapters. Now the first one is we're going to look at the Socratic method. So the first thing that you have to know is you have to know who is Socrates. Now these are the Greek philosophers. It's based on philosophy. It's based on the different Greek philosophers. There are certain aspects or certain theories that they've used, which we call philosophy. Now, when you look at ethics, ethics is based on philosophy. It's based on different philosophical theories. And one of the theories or philosophers that we are using is one of the Greek philosophers is Socrates. Socrates, doesn't matter how you pronounce it, it's very important. Now, he came up with what we call the Socratic method, one of the philosophy of good and justice. So you need to have an understanding of the different philosophers. Plato, for an example, his own philosopher, you have to look at those different. So you have to know what it is. You need to know the content of those philosophy, and you need to be able to discuss it. And when I say discuss, I mean you look at the pros and the cons, or you look at the advantage, disadvantage, you look at whether you agree or you disagree. So that's part of the discussion. So the Socratic method, you look what is good. What is good? What is justice? Is that which is justice good? And how can you justify what is good? So this is what you have to look at, and you have to go into detail. We've already covered this in our previous presentation, but I would prefer, if you don't understand, you can go to your library and read all about the Greek philosophers and the different philosophical viewpoints, and how those philosophical viewpoints are actually linked to ethics. And this is the subject, the content of the subject. Then the other concept that you also need to look at, you are not just going to look at the Greek philosopher or the Western philosopher, you're also going to look at the Eastern philosopher, the philosophy of the Indians, the philosophy of the Asian philosophy. So both Western and Eastern philosophy, how can you use those philosophies when it comes to ethics? And many of those philosophies are applicable when it comes to ethics, and one of them is the concept of goodness and happiness. Now there is a difference of goodness and happiness. If I ask you the question, how do you feel today? Then you say, I feel good. Someone might say, no, I feel happy. So is there a difference between goodness and happiness? So and this is where you have to look in to have an understanding what this concept is all about. Now this concept is used so many times in different spheres or different cultures. In your discussion, you can also bring out the different cultures of the world where you discuss this concept. You can also look at the disadvantage of this concept, for example. What do you define is happiness? What do you define is good? And it all depends on different world views or different perspective. And in your discussion, you can also bring on the different world views or the different perspective when it comes to this concept. So read it, study it, and understand what the concept is all about. So in ethics, we also have the issue of behavior, of morality. We call it moral behavior. And you can link that also to goodness and happiness, to the above mentioned concepts of Socratic and the Eastern and the Western philosophy. When you look at about behavior, what behaviors are moral, what behaviors are immoral. And morality just look at something that's good. Immorality is looking at something that's bad. So you have to know what different behaviors are there that constitute moral behavior, on what behaviors are there that constitute bad behavior, which are immoral behavior. You can also bring some dynamics of psychology, where you look at different behavioral theories and how that is also linked to the philosophical viewpoint of moral behavior. What do you do to the others? The good that you do to the others is also the good that you expect from the others. But the bad that you do to the others is also the bad that you will receive from the others. So your behavior, it's a very important thing. Sometimes people behave very bad and they justify their bad behavior being good. How do you justify certain behavior as good, and how do you justify certain behavior as bad? And this is where you have to look into the whole concept of moral behavior. Then the other aspect that you also need to look at is the hierarchy of needs. Maslow is having his hierarchy or his pyramid of needs. Now Maslow is one of the world's leading psychologists, whatever you call it, philosopher or a psychologist, doesn't matter how you call it, but his theory on needs, basic human needs, are very important, and it has helped a number of people, countless of people, to help themselves to prioritize their needs. And when you look at the pyramid of Maslow, where he divides the different basic needs of human, and you will find it very interesting. And it's not just the need, but the whole process of going from one needs to the following needs, and how do you make sure that your needs are fulfilled? Because according to Maslow, the top of the pyramid is what we call the self-actualization, where you reach the place where you're actually fulfilled as a human being, or you're filled, you are happy. So what do you constitute as self-fulfillment? Which is linked, of course, to your needs. So every one of us are having needs. We are having basic needs. So in your discussion, you have to know what are these needs. You first need to discuss the concept of Maslow. Who is Maslow? The concept of hierarchy. Why does he call it the hierarchy, or the hierarchy of needs, or the pyramid of needs? And then discuss each needs. How important is that need for a person? And then secondly is the prioritization of those needs. Because according to his pyramid, there are different levels of needs, but some needs are more important to others than certain needs. So how do certain people prioritize certain needs in their life? What makes certain needs more important than certain needs? So it's very important that in your discussion you have to look into this, you have to look in detail, which are very important when it comes to Muslim, and how that's linked to ethics. And even if you want to fulfill your needs, there are certain ethical considerations that you have to look at. There are certain ethical principles that you have to look at when you look at the fulfillment of your need, or meeting your own needs as a human being. And some people want to meet their needs at the expense of others. So, and again, you have to look and discuss into that. Then the other thing is conflict of interest when it comes to ethics. Conflict of interest, for example, if you are, for example, the owner of a company and there is a competition, your company is running a competition, there are prizes to be won. Are you allowed, as the owner of the company, to participate in the competition just because you are the owner? And what conflict is there when it comes to, for example, that you know the answer to the questions, or whether you will help yourself to win the prizes? For example, in a job interview, you know that you're in a job interview, you're part of a panel, and a family member or your child or your spouse is one of the candidates. What influence do you give on the interviewing panel as part of the recruitment process? And how is it wrong, or is it back? It's this whole issue is, do you have personal interest into something, and does that personal interest create a conflict when it comes to the policy and the procedure of the organization, especially the policy of transparency? Will you tell your colleagues that that what I am doing, or where I am, it's a conflict of interest because I've got self-interest in what I'm doing? So it's very important that in your discussion you have to define what is conflict of interest. You have to give different examples of conflict of interest. You have to give example of what are the challenges that organizations are facing when it comes to conflict of interest. Then you have to discuss is, how do you address personally when you are faced with conflict of interest as a person? How do you deal with it? How do you address it, for example? What do you do if you find yourself in a situation where there is conflict of interest as a whistleblower? What are your ethical responsibility as a whistleblower, for example, to know that this is part of revealing any conflict of interest in a company or an organization. So when it comes to ethics and ethical principle, conflict of interest plays a very important role. So in your exam, you have to discuss this different aspect, this different dimension, this different areas of conflict of interest. If it's a 20 mark, if the question is 20 marks, then of course it is expected from you to write not less than 1 page, at least 2 pages, 1.5 pages, to discuss it in detail the whole concept of conflict of interest. Then, of course, there's also another aspect of ethics, which is nursing ethics. Now, nursing ethics is very important. Now, if you are a nurse, there are different ethical principles that you have to abide with. And one of the code of nursing is the Florence Nightingale Code of Nursing. The Florence Nightingale Code of Nursing actually only define how nurses have to conduct themselves as medical professionals, what are required from them as part of the ethical responsibility when they find themselves in a situation where their ethical principles are being challenged. What do they do if the ethical principles are being compromised? What do you do as a nurse? So this is where you have to define in detail what are nursing ethics, what does it consist or entails, what are the challenges, how do they address it, how do they face it, how do they... so it's very important that you have to go into detail and to understand what this ethic for nursing actually entails and what is then also expected from them as a nurse as much as possible. Then, of course, there's also the other aspect of medical ethics. As a medical doctor, as a medical practitioner, there are certain ethical principles that you have to adhere to. So you have to go through this. There are different medical ethics principles that you have to look through. For example, as a medical doctor, when you give a description to someone, that you know that the person is dependent on those drug prescription, for example. It can make that person a drug addict. So what do you do when it comes to the medical ethics? This is very important. I can give you so many examples. For example, the famous example of Michael Jackson, where he died, and his own personal physician, a doctor, was then taken to court because of this very thing, which is medical ethics, where the court has to investigate, did the medical doctor or the personal physician or doctor of Michael Jackson contravene his code of ethics? Did he break the rules? And as you know, that he was found guilty because of that, and he had to go to jail. So discuss this ethical principle with different examples and in detail. And also, as part of the ethics, you have to look at the whole issue of pregnancy and HIV, pregnant women. And this is where confidentiality comes in. How do you practice the principle of confidentiality? If you are going to counsel somebody in confidence, how do you make sure that you're going to protect this person's privacy, this person's identity, even protect this person's status? And this is where the doctor-patient privileges come in, that especially when you do VCT, voluntary counseling and testing, is when you have a client coming to you for counseling, is how do you keep the content of this counseling session confidential? How do you keep it very secret? What do you do when a third party is involved? What are the ethical principles that are there when you bring a third party involved in a counseling session? When this counseling session, when the ethical principle is being violated, what do you do? So discuss confidentiality in detail, give example, also discuss how it can be violated and how important it is to keep the principle of confidentiality. And then, of course, you have to look at the issue of treatment and care. Again, many people, they know their status, but the question is, do you refer them to adequate treatment for the HIV status? What kind of care do they receive? So these are some of the things that you have to look at, which are very, very important when it comes to ethical principle. So I have come to the end of my presentation, and I hope that you had a better understanding on the content you will be ready to prepare yourself for the upcoming exam. I hope that you have learned something from this, and I thank you for watching and listening to me, and I wish you all the best for your exam. Thank you.